Well, good morning. It's Friday. It's good to be with you this morning. God's richest blessings on our time together, and it's so good to spend this time together. I love Fridays, and it's a beautiful day. Go ahead and say hi to each other on Facebook. I'm here in Chicago still, and it's raining this morning. So it's a rainy day here in Chicago. We're not going to go outside. We were going to go and look at some tadpoles at a little river up the street that's not too far, but I'm afraid that by the time we get there, that we saw like 1 million tadpoles the other day, and we wanted to see if they'd all turn into frogs, but I think they're going to all be washed out by this rain. It's pretty incredible. Anyway, good to see you this morning. It's a beautiful day. Just a few announcements. First of all, there are no birthdays that I can see today. We got a bunch coming up next week, so don't forget about that. But we don't have any right now or today or over the weekend. So it's just a birthday less Friday and a birthday less weekend. And I was reading somewhere that maybe my Teddy Roosevelt statue wasn't going to be removed, but then I did some more research this morning, and they're still thinking about removing it. If you remember, a couple days ago, I had a little bit of a problem with removing one of my favorite president's statues, but I've done a little bit more research on it, and I guess it's always been a controversial statue. And maybe they'll replace it with a different statue of Roosevelt. I guess it's not the statue of Roosevelt necessarily, but he's flanked by one Native American and one African American, and apparently that's offensive. So I don't know. But I do know that Teddy Roosevelt, it's the American Museum of Natural History or something like that in Washington, D.C., and if there's anybody that deserves to be in front of the American Museum of Natural History, it's Teddy Roosevelt. He was an incredible preservationist, if you want to call it like that. He was very, very much a guy that helped start the National Park Service, a guy that really helped preserve some of our natural habitats and resources around the United States. I mean, if you're gonna highlight one American that was really beneficial for all the outdoor stuff that we have here in the United States, he would definitely be one of them. And I'm not even sure who would even come close, a close second to that. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we need to pick somebody from a different country or something. I don't know. I mean, what are statues anyway? They're just monuments to people who have done great things for our country. It's to help us to band together as a country to say we honor these people because they did things. They were great leaders. Leadership is hard to come by. Leadership is very difficult because when you're in leadership, as Teddy Roosevelt pointed out, you have people spitting at you and people very angry at you. You have the vocal people who are very angry at any leader because of the leaders being effective, leaders getting something done. And if a leader's getting something done, then he's always going to have opposition to that. So I'm sure that Teddy Roosevelt experienced that pain of leadership, as many leaders do. And but maybe, and so we honor. I mean, that's the reason why we put up monuments and statues to leaders, because they actually we want to honor that kind of stuff. We want to honor people who actually do lead. And I think that getting rid of all the statues of all the leaders is another way for people to say maybe we don't need leaders. Maybe we should just always have the status quo. I don't know. I don't know. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Teddy Roosevelt today. So, but we're going to continue our study on faith and Abram. And I think as we go through the book of Genesis, one of the things I'd like to do is to just kind of track the faith of Abraham. Is his faith high? Is his faith low? And when his faith gets low, what does he do? What does God do? When his faith is high, what does he do? What does God do? I think as we go through the story of Abraham, it might be just very interesting to track that, because I think it has a lot of impact onto our own faith journey. Like, what do we do when our faith is high? What do we do when our faith is low? What does God do when our faith is high? What does God do when our faith is low? How do we build our faith? How do we grow our faith? We talked about this a little bit yesterday about the whole idea of faith is complementary. It's that a human being is like a tree, right? And the faith is like the root system. Here, the faith is like the root system, and what you see is like the person and what that person is doing in their life. I did have a little bit of an illustration of that I thought I might share. We went to, Jennifer and I, in the middle of this coronavirus, decided to go to the store together, which you're not supposed to do, I suppose. You send one person from your household to the store, but we lived together. We playing it very, very safe. We decided to go to a Walmart. We went to the Walmart in Benson because the Walmart in Benson, we assumed would have less people in it and might be less at risk for coronavirus than the one in Rita Ranch. And the Rita Ranch one is 10 minutes closer, but the one in Benson is a lot more fun. Before the one was built in Rita Ranch, Jennifer and I would go to the Walmart in Benson all the time to buy all sorts of stuff because it was very nice. I remember walking in there once. This is a tangent on a tangent, but we walked in there once, and this lady came up to me and she said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I was looking for a pair of shoes in my size." She goes, "Well, I see we don't have them on the shelf. Let me go see if we have them in the back room." And so she left, and 5 minutes later she came back and she said, "I'm so sorry we don't have them in the back room, but I'm told that they're going to come in next week, and maybe you could come back next week." I mean, it was just the nicest thing. We've always had a deep, warm sentiment about the Walmart that's in Benson. Anyway, so we decided to go to Walmart in Benson. That's a tangent on a tangent. Now we're getting to the tangent. So I go into Walmart in Benson, and they have grapevines on sale. Now, in my backyard, I have grapes, and I want more grapes, and I even want more grapes. So every time I see grapes on sale, my heart's like, Now, I mean, when I say on sale, I mean, I think they're normally like $5, and they were on sale for $2.99 or $3.99. So we're not talking about a lot of money here. But if you know anything about me, I'm cheap, okay? I'm looking at this like I want some more grapevines. They're on sale. But the way that they sell these grapevines is that I think they grow them big and get that root system really big, because the stem of the grape, the main stem of the grape is probably, how big is that? About the size of a large dowel, I guess, or something like that. About even bigger than a pencil. Kind of, I don't know, but it's about that big. So, and then they cut that off, but they allow one sprout to come out of the base, and it's a smaller sprout. And I think the reason why they do that is to kind of cut off the root system from supporting that huge tree, so all that energy now goes into that little thing, but it can't get that sprout out yet because the sprout's not planted yet. Because once we planted these things, so I did buy something, we planted them. And once I planted them, they just like took off. I mean, and now it's growing like gangbusters. All of them we bought are just doing fantastic. And the reason why they're doing fantastic isn't because the stalk, was big, because they had cut off the stalk, the main stalk of this thing. It was just this little shoot. The reason why the plant was doing so well is because the root system must have been huge on this thing. I mean, when I planted it, it had a lot of roots. Which just goes to show you that the root system is extremely important. If the root system is intact and there's at least one shoot on the plant, and you plant it in proper soil and you give it proper nutrition, the thing takes off like crazy. I would say that the root system is as important, if not more important, to the health of the plant than the actual stalk itself, because you can actually cut off you can prune an incredible amount of stuff on the top material. And then if it's got a proper root system, it will grow. I mean, unless, it's very, very strange. I mean, it's the root system. So if the root is like your faith, if you've got a strong faith and God's been growing your faith, it really doesn't matter how much God prunes you or what things in life happen to you to kind of prune you or to shake you to your roots or to, I think the death of a loved one is cutting off a major branch. I think getting sick is cutting off a major branch. There's losing your job is cutting off a major branch. I mean, there's lots of stuff that happens in your life that cuts off major branches into your life. But if the root system, if the faith is intact, then you will bounce back from that. You will have a V-shaped recovery from that because the root system is the important thing here. It's so all that being said is that it's important for us then, as followers of God, followers of Jesus Christ, to let our root system grow as big and strong as possible, and just feed it, nourish it, give it water, give it sunshine. Let that root system spread out, because if the root system is strong, then whatever happens in your life, you can manage it. You can weather the storms in life because of the root system. And how do you get your root system strong? And that's the question I think I want to look at with Abraham. Because if you'll remember, actually, I think I've got a quote here. Romans 4:3, Paul on Abraham says this. What does Scripture say? Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So the Apostle Paul holds up Abraham as this exemplar of faith, and looks at Abraham to say, look at a guy who had great faith. And you look at Abraham, and like I said yesterday, the guy's a cad. He's every one of us. But he's held up as this guy that has great faith. Well, I think he's just an example of a guy with great faith. Now, certainly he did have great faith, and God tested him in amazing ways, and he passed the test. And other ways he didn't pass the test. But how did Abraham's faith grow? That's what I'd really like to spend some time here in Genesis, just trying to answer that question. Because if Abraham's, who is every one of us, can grow his faith, then maybe his example can help us grow our faith, all right? So the first thing that we found out right out of the bat is that God called Abraham to leave his country where he had grown up, the comfort of his land, the comfort of his people, the comfort of everything around him, and then to go. And Abraham does. And I'm sure if you're living in Vale, which most of you are, maybe not all of you, but if you're living in Vale, you didn't get there because you stayed there for generations. There's very few first, second, third generations people living in Vale. So at some point, you, like me, moved to Vale. So we know what it's like to leave the comfort of the place that we've lived in and move to a new place. I grew up in Phoenix, and I lived there for 32 years, pretty much in the same neighborhood. I grew up... Phoenix is laid out in a grid site system. You have 40th Street. These are every 8 streets is a mile from downtown Phoenix. So I grew up on 40th Street. So I was only 5 miles east of Central Avenue, which goes right through downtown Phoenix. So I grew up on 40th Street. After I got married, I lived on 28th Street. My parents, at one point, we lived at 32nd Street. Then we lived on another house on 32nd Street. I mean, these are all north-south streets, but I grew up, I spent 32 years in the same neighborhood. And maybe you've done that also, but spending all that time in the same, there's a comfort level that is very, very attractive, because you know where everything is. And then the job I was working at, I was asked if I would move to Colorado and open up an office, a branch office of the company I was working for. And I really didn't want to leave Phoenix, but there were a couple things. One is that I think my wife really didn't like Phoenix, and so she was kind of excited about the potential of moving to Colorado. Actually, her grandmother lived in Loveland, Colorado. And I remember coming home and saying, my boss has asked if we could move to Colorado. And she got up and she left. And I'm like, what's happening? So I followed her, and she was in the bedroom, and she was packing. I'm like, what are you doing? She goes, well, we're moving to Colorado. I was like, I haven't said yes yet. We're just, no, you're going to say yes. We're going to move to Colorado. I said, okay, well, there you go. And so So that's one thing. But the other thing is that there are times when you cannot advance any further in where you live. How do I say this? It wasn't just the job. It was just that there was too much comfort in the way things were in my life. The job was comfortable. The location was comfortable. Everything was comfortable, and I just have a hard time with comfort. I guess the way God created me is I need to have new challenges and new things. I think in in Ephesians 3, that's basically that I'm an apostle, that I'm always looking at like what the next thing is, and that's the way God's created me. And I guess it was just too comfortable to stay in Phoenix, and so we moved to Denver. And the same thing is true with Abraham. He had been living in Ur for a long time, and then God said, "Okay, Abram, it's time to move. It's time to get out of your comfort zone. It's time to move." And so Abram does. And so as far as the first step of faith goes, then, I guess you could say that Abram followed God. He heard God's call, and he decided to move, and he followed. He did what God called him to do. And so that is definitely a highlight in Abram's life, because he actually took that step of faith. And when he did, his faith was growing like crazy. It was like miracle grow for his root system. When he gets to the first location, he builds an altar to God. Then he gets to the second location, he gets an altar to God. Everything's going well in his life. And then, of course, this famine hits, and now Abram has to move out of where he is, and he's going to go to Egypt. And so when he decides to get to Egypt, he looks to his wife, who is also his half-sister, and says, "I'm going to tell everyone that you're my half-sister, because otherwise they will kill me." And this is probably a step backwards for Abram's faith, because God had told Abram, "I will make you a great nation. You are going to be a great people. People will be blessed because of you. You're going to have progeny. Everything is going to turn out just fine, Abram. Don't worry about it." But he gets into Egypt, and he's like, he has to take things into his own hand, and so he lies to the Egyptians, not even thinking, what happens if Pharaoh finds out? I mean, what happens if Pharaoh ends up being with Sarai and all of a sudden finds out that she's married to this Abraham? I mean, I would think that Pharaoh would kill Abram. And it would be in a worse spot than before he even went to Egypt. I mean, this is a secret that if it comes out, it could destroy Abram. And I don't know what Abram's thinking. Like, he's going to wake up in the middle of the night, and he's going to take Sarah, and he's going to go out of Egypt. I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, how do you go up to Egypt and say, "Oh, Pharaoh, great one. By the way, This lady that you have in your court that's absolutely beautiful, and I told you she's my sister, she's actually my wife, and we'd like to leave now." I mean, it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. What was he thinking? Well, maybe he wasn't thinking, right? I don't know. I'm sure if you've had children, right? It's like, what are they thinking? What are they thinking? Maybe this never happened to you with children. It's happened to us one or two times. Anyway, so Abram is now. So when we left the story yesterday, Abram's in Egypt. The wife has been ensconced by Pharaoh's court. Abram is being treated like royalty because he's considered to be the brother. But the problem is that A, he's not followed God. B, he hasn't built an altar to God. And C, now he's stuck in Egypt. And God has plans for Abram, and they're not in Egypt. And God's like, "What were you thinking? What were you thinking?" And so now that's where we left the story, and that's where we're going to pick it up. So we got as far, well, let's just look at verse 14, which is about halfway down the slide. Verse 14, when Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman, of course. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. And he, being Pharaoh, treated Abram well for her sake. And Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels, and all life is going well. But the problem is, God's got different plans for Abram. So let's see what happens. What does God do? But the Lord inflicted a serious disease on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. Okay, so he summoned Abram, and it's like, this is not going to go well for you, Abram. Sorry, you lied to Pharaoh. You're a cad. I don't know how you get out of this. And so Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me, he said. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister, that I took her to be my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her. Go. And then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So Pharaoh doesn't kill Abram and takes Sarai anyway. I mean, this is just... Abram lied. He got all this lavish gifts. I mean, it was all because of the beauty of his wife. Pharaoh's like... And then he gets inflicted with the disease. This is something that God does. God injects into the situation what God can do. He injects a disease, and Pharaoh ends up allowing Abram and Sarai and all the donkeys, all the servants to just leave, right? This is like a mini exodus, and gets him out. And then, of course, Pharaoh's court gets better from the disease, right? So this is something that God does to rescue Abram. And there are times in our lives when we do things that are just absolutely mind-bogglingly stupid. And God has a plan for us, and God set it up and teed up the ball and given us the 9-iron and said, okay, there's the whole swing and do it. And we throw down the 9-iron and we walk off the tee, and God's like, what's wrong with you? But then, as we're walking off the tee, God puts a big boulder, and we stumble on the boulder, and we break our leg, and then, we recover, and it's like, we never did hit that 9-iron shot. So we go back out, and God gets us in the right path. Even when we do stupid things, God is still behind the scenes working. One of my favorite Bible verses, right, is all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Because no matter how stupidly we mess up, no matter how many times God does a face plant on his forehead and say, what was David thinking? Oh my goodness. David. I teed it up for you. I had it all ready to go, and you blew it. And I'm sorry, God, that I blew it. But then God, changes the circumstances, takes what I did and messed up, and molds it into his plan and turns it out for good, even though I mess up. And that's what we see here in Abram. And I take incredibly strong comfort in that, because I am a sinful human being, as we all are. We're all going to mess up. We're all going to do things the wrong way. But God never messes up. And God can take the most amazingly stupid thing that we've ever done, and he can still work it to his good. And this is what he did with Abram, right? Abram messed up. God had it all teed for him. Then he goes into Egypt, and then God basically takes Sarai, inflicts this serious disease on Pharaoh, and Abram's able to leave. And that's just, that is the power of God. That is the wonder of God. That is the blessing of God. Because God's got everything under control. And even in this coronavirus, as we're sitting around trying to figure out what the heck are we doing, and people are getting sick, people are, all sorts of terrible things happening in the world, but God's got it under control. And the important things in life are still under God's thumb, and he's doing amazing and wonderful things. And as a church, we can look at this as a horrible inconvenience that's causing us all great stress. Or we can see how God's teed up the ball for us and given us a 9-iron and say, okay, here's the situation. Now what are you going to do? And do amazing things for the kingdom, even in the midst of the coronavirus. I mean, one of the things that I'm just absolutely amazed is that it is not that hard for me to actually just pop in and spend a half an hour for you, whereas if we were all to get together and we were to have a Bible study, I would have to get there early and set up the chairs, or somebody would, and we'd have to get coffee, and we'd all have to I mean, it would be a production to be able to do this every day. I don't think I'd have the energy or the wherewithal to lead this Genesis Bible study every day. But here I am in Chicago with my granddaughter who's upstairs giggling, and as soon as I'm done, I'm just going to pop up there and play with her and probably play with the rest of the day, and I'm still able to do this Bible study with you, spend this time with you. And this is going to be a new opportunity for the church to do and reach in ways that we've never been able to reach before. And I think that God has teed up for us something amazing. And I think that those churches that look at this opportunity and say, okay, how are we gonna leverage? God's teed up the ball and He's given us a 9-iron. How are we gonna move forward with this? I think they're gonna see amazing things happen. And I don't know. I have no idea how long this is gonna last or what it's gonna look like when we get on the other side. But I do know that God still works for good for those who love Him, who are called according to His purpose. He's not done with me yet. He's not done with Christ Lutheran Vale Church yet. He's not done with all of you yet, because you're sitting here watching this. And as long as He's got all those resources available in His hands, He's going to continue to do amazing things. And so that kind of brings... But right now, I would say that Abram, as he's leaving Egypt now and thinking about and reflecting upon what's gone on, we will find that he blesses God for getting him out of Egypt, for saving his life, for saving Sarai's life, for allowing him to continue on to do these things that God has, because God obviously has plans for Abram, because He told him, I got plans for you. The whole world's going to be blessed because of you. And so I would say that Abram now has miracle grow just being dripped on his root system. And right now, as he's leaving Egypt, I would see... you don't necessarily see it on the surface of the tree, but I think that his root system is growing leaps and bounds by what God has done in his life. If Abram pauses and reflects to see what God is doing in his life, which we should do every day, right? We should every day pause and reflect and see what God's doing in our life, so that we can get that miracle grow. Pausing and reflecting is miracle grow for the root system. All right, so I think we'll leave it there. It is Friday, so a little bit shorter study today. And besides, I hear my daughter Dakota a little screaming. Maybe she needs her grandfather. So let's close in prayer. Gracious God, thanks for this time together. Thanks for the example of Abraham. Thanks for getting him out of Egypt alive and safely, and for showing him as an example of how you can do amazing things in even the most unamazing situations. Be with us over the weekend. Bring us back together again next week. Keep us safe and in your grace. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so our next time together is Monday. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to watch worship service. You can watch it on Facebook Live, or you can watch it on YouTube Live. It's going to be available on both places. We're going to publicize both places because not everybody's on Facebook, and we think that we figured out the whole YouTube thing. So we're going to go in that direction also. And it should be a great worship service. It should actually be a really, really good worship service. You'll enjoy it a lot. But I will see you again on Monday. God's blessings. Take care.